Hello, and welcome to another week of the Storied Arcs podcast. I am your co-host, Mike.
And I'm your co-host, Alex.
And today we are diving deep into the world of Know Your Station. This is by Sarah Gailey once again and Liana Kangas. And we also have colors from,
Rebecca Nulty.
Rebecca Nulty
and letters once again by Cardinal Ray.
Yep. Which... no particular order here, but I don't want to forget Cardinal Ray. Great lettering in this book and quite distinct from last week's book.
Yeah. Oh, well, I mean, it's got to serve a different function. There's the obvious things of the setting is different. Sometime in the future we're talking about space and AI and things like that. And so there's a natural sense of, I think we as an audience have a sense of what that's supposed to feel like, right? We bring our own preconceptions of what living in a space station or spaceship would be like. And so, yeah, I think the letters that are shown there, they add to that, and nothing jumps out as being out of place. And so, yeah, there are different fonts and the way that, the AI here, St. Brigid is always shown with that like tealish background, I guess. What do we call
I was
that?
Gonna call it blue, but I think teal is the safer word.
It's a teal or a cyan kind of thing there, with black lettering.
But even if you didn't have that, you can tell human speech from AI speech because of the font.
Yes. There's
the
robotic font.
Helping,
yeah,
but
the robotic font that always comes up anytime you deal with robots or AI or anything like that. So yeah, it's a shorthand of when you're reading it. I think right away when in that opening scene, well, I getting past the opening pages, which are like the welcome video, right? Like the intro video, the first actor page of story, which starts with our main character, Elise, with her head in the toilet. I think right away that even if you don't clock the visual of the face behind her, kind of in the golden orange yellowish, even if you don't clock that, I think you understand that she's speaking to a computer, right? That voice is artificial, is what we'll call it here. And that's simply because of how it's presented. So you automatically know what you're dealing with. You're dealing with, before it was that blue text was, you read that as the narration of your welcome video to the staff. But as soon as it jumps to the actual narrative, right away that, okay, we're dealing with some sort of artificial intelligence. We're dealing with a computer. This is what that sounds like and looks like. Well, sounds like in your head. But by seeing it that way and reading it that way, however you read dialogue in your head as you're going, you understand that is meant to be an artificial voice, not a human.
Yeah, and I, given the writing, when this goes to Sarah's work, they write the robot in such a way, the AI in such a way that I've projected a certain attitude and a little bit of like cheekiness to it. Within a few pages.
It is clear that this AI is advanced in a way that it understands, sarcasm and snark and things of that nature. And you get right away what the relationship is between the AI, St. Brigid, and Elise. And I got from reading it, I remember the first time, and it jumped out again on a reread, and maybe it's because I've already read the story. And they actualize that later on in the actual story itself. But the idea that the relationship we're seeing, this quite intimate moment of Elise trying to, coming off a high here or whatever, going through withdrawal, her interaction with St. Brigid is different. It's special. Now, this is not how the AI interacts with anyone else. And even though at this point you've only seen one human character and one AI character, it jumped out very clearly to me very, very quickly. I think that goes to the way that these scenes are written and presented, that you get a sense that this is not normal AI. This is not how the AI is meant to function, I guess. You don't expect AI to have that level of sarcasm, that level of snark, that level of familiarity, that comes with, your friends just kind of, busting each other's chops,
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's since we're talking about it, let's talk about it. Which for me is, I think, the main mystery. There's like the whodunit killer thing,
Yeah.
but after two issues, that becomes a lot less interesting to me
Well,
than the unreliable narrator question.
I was going to ask at what point, because I think as soon as we get into the story here, we realize that, oh, this is a murder. I mean, very quickly, we understand it's a murder mystery, and not only is it a murder mystery, but we've actually come in the middle of a murder mystery because there was a previous murder that we only see like the recreation of. You know,
Right.
that's kind of the where we jump in and meet Elise. So you understand that, okay, there's something going on. There's a killer on the loose in the space station. You know, so it's an elevated locked room scenario, right?
Yes.
But you're on a spaceship, you're in the future, and you have this AI. So I was curious, at what point did you clock, or did you even, whether you knew you were right or not, at what point did you clock like, oh, it's evil AI, like it's Hal,
Well,
or
so
did
I
you
mean,
think that at any
I think
point?
they would even question whether it's evil AI.
Okay, okay, fine, totally
But
fair.
yes,
When did you clock that the AI was responsible for all these killings, evil or not,
I think
justified or
the
not?
first time Elise said, "I don't want more drugs," and got more drugs anyway, I was
Okay,
like,
yes, yeah,
okay,
yes,
either the AI is, I mean, the AI is definitely doing something shitty. Is there someone pulling the strings of the AI, or is this what the AI wants to be doing? In which case, the AI is the problem here.
okay,
And
yeah.
and I
That
think,
is true. It is unclear. It could have been revealed that someone was reprogramming the AI to do this,
right, it could have been that
or
whoever
was the AI fully
is
sentient? Yeah.
running the ship for the rich people is saying, "Hey, if anybody starts to get too woke, you just tamp them back down with some drugs." And that actually was, for me, I thought that that was actually the emerging theme. It would have been very interesting to me if we never find the killer, the murders just stop because whoever is being called, and Elise starts to question whether they actually happened or whether that was uh, hallucination based
From the
off
drug,
of,
from the blue. Yeah.
or from the blue, or the withdrawal of the blue.
Oh, true. Yeah,
Because
yeah. That's
there
because
was a point where,
they make a very specific mention that one of the side effects of withdrawal from blue is hallucination. Like
right, which seems
they put
like,
that up front or very early to intentionally, clearly.
right, yeah. So you have Elise questioning her own sanity about halfway through the book,
Mhm.
and I was right there with him. I was like, okay, Sarah got me to question that, because I was like, okay, well, there are all of these spacey, trippy pages. There are gaps in consciousness that we need to account for. It is very possible that no one has died.
Interesting. Okay.
Of course, you find out that's not the case. People are dying.
Yeah.
Uh, but I thought for a moment that the theme of this was going to be about drug addiction, but not a message about, not like a dare message about drugs, but about distraction and escape,
Okay. Sure.
and those ways to pacify people who do not have much control over their lives, and whether,
So
right,
you
some
like
type of escapism, like the rich people were like,
giving
let's
the
just keep
people.
them pacified, right,
Oh,
keep them in
interesting,
to so they know their station, so they stay in their
interesting.
place.
That I
And
oh wow, I didn't that didn't cross my mind at all. I like that and but that totally tracks though. That
I think
totally
it's
tracks with the
valid. I
kind of
don't,
book this would have been, and the kind of book that
well, it's the name
coming
of the
off
book,
of Eat the
right?
Rich we would have
Okay, so
expected.
when I hear Know Your Station, I think of Jane Austen, right? Those are all books about
Yeah,
like knowing
yeah,
your station in life, and people always trying to rise above their station.
yeah.
And there's always some rich noble class, or Dickens, there's always some rich noble class trying to keep you in the station you were born in,
Yeah.
and keep you from ascending. And so Know Your Station sounds like it's a
Know your
reprimand,
place. Yeah,
like
know
know
your
your place,
role. Don't question it. Yeah,
stay in your lane,
interesting.
is the language. And I think whether it's streaming, binging entertainment, planning endless distractions through travel and vacation or recreational drug use or whatever, uh, I think there are people who would say these are all ways to pacify people, because it's like, yeah, you're not going to have uh, a longer lifespan. You're not going to get great health care. You're not going to have a lot of money. But for $20 a month, you can sit on your couch and stream news shows all the time, and that will keep you happy enough. And there is something about uh, our lifestyles where someone could make that argument and say, whether it's doom scrolling on Instagram or TikTok or whatever, or it's like, because I do have friends. I like traveling. I don't really like vacation, and it's maybe an arbitrary and artificial distinction, but it always bums me out when I hear people who hate their job and it's January and I've got a friend who's already like, just got to make it till March. I got a trip planned in March. I'm really excited for this trip. And then they get home from the trip and I'm like, uh, did you have fun? They're like, yeah, it was great. It was so nice to be away from work. And then a week later, they're like, okay, in July, I'm going to Puerto Rico. It's going to be great. Just got to make it to July. And it is like, uh,
That's
it
the
is,
reward, right? That's the
well,
carrot
it's
at
a
the end.
binge
Yeah.
and withdrawal, right? And
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
they're going through something they would rather not, because they feel they have no other choice, but at least they get this little carrot at certain intervals. And
Well, yeah.
so
That's,
you know
that's definitely, that's how other people, he says, as he thinks about the fact that he'll be traveling to a pretty cool comic convention in a few weeks at the
hey,
time of
you
this
know what?
recording.
Like I said, I have nothing against travel.
Yeah.
And I'm like, the little dopamine hit you get from like the hobby that we're bonding over right now, which is that we get
Yeah.
weekly comic drops, right?
Yeah. Oh,
It's
of
like,
course. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it's like, the middle of the week kind of sucks, but Wednesday lunch I can go get some new books and it'll be
Well,
okay.
I was just joking about the Comic Con thing, but that's actually not a joke. I actually am definitely going to traveling to a convention in a few weeks. But yeah, I understand all that entirely, because as much as I love, and I really do, like I truly do love standing in lines and to meet creators. I like talking to them. I'm a signature hunter. I've got nearly 800 some odd individual issues, like comics signed. I love collecting that. I love going and doing that. But the part I actually really love is gathering all those issues that I'm going to take with me to a con.
Yeah.
So it's that small dopamine hit of digging through
You're like, oh, they're going to
back
be
issue
there. I
long
think I
box.
got something. And then it's like,
Yeah,
oh, it's
yeah,
not in
yeah.
the box I thought it
Yeah,
would be in.
yeah,
Let's go.
yeah. Or scrolling through and seeing a creator that you like, and maybe there's, oh, hey, there's this cover for this issue that I never read before. I didn't know about this. I'm gonna put it on a wish list, and I'm gonna go drive around to 6 different places that sell comics and try to find it. And when you do, it's like, yes, I can bring this random thing to have signed for this interaction that's going to take 25, 30 seconds, for them to just look at that and sign the issue, but it's about that. It's about that hunt. It's about trying to find it.
Right.
That and yeah, in some way is a distraction. The fact of like, yes, I can go and do this because I'm going to spend, you have to work in order to have the means to then go and do these things, and whether it's about how much you like or not like your job, it ultimately becomes a means to some end, whether that end is
Sure.
like
I
your
mean,
friend
and
of
we're
traveling and vacationing every 3 or 4 months, or whatever it is. There is an idea of, I'm doing this solely I can do something else, and as opposed to
right. But it's a way to feel a little bit of control over your life, even
yeah,
though
yeah, yeah,
it's like, well, I couldn't choose not to work.
yeah.
So since I
Obviously
have
not.
to
Yeah, of
work,
course.
I'm
Yeah.
going to choose something that makes it feel like a little bit of a trade-off. And I win 4 weeks a year of PTO out of
Yes.
52 weeks a year. And
Achievement
that's a
unlocked.
massive win.
Another week of PTO.
Which, like, again, this is not a judgment on anyone. I'm saying
No,
this is like a trap that we're all caught in to some extent, and
that's
we all have our
society, though. I mean,
different.
that
Yeah,
is,
no, that is
and
society.
I do think that is what they're commenting on in this one here is about. Yeah, that I mean, it's the rat race, right? That's what
Right.
we
And
always call
and
it,
I think
right?
there is always the utopian, naive dream of, well, no one would have to do undesirable work, and
Yes,
people would only do the work that they like
they
doing, and they would
loved.
only
Yes,
do as much of it as they want.
yeah,
Um, and it's like, well, that would be awesome. Like, sign me up as soon as you figure that out, how to make it work.
exactly.
I'm
Yeah,
on board.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah. No,
but yeah, within the world we have, however, you and I are both college educated, have a lot more freedom of choice in terms of the type of work we do. Uh, were I born to uh less fortunate circumstances, I may not have that kind of control. It's like, you know.
But at the same time, though, at the same time, there is still, it doesn't really, it does, it, I think it's a commentary on the world that we have, that it doesn't matter what station you're born into, whether you deemed it privileged or fortunate or not. Everyone at some level can feel trapped at what they are. And
Oh yeah,
how you
right,
deal with
right,
that, do you feel trapped and you feel like you have to take a step up or a step sideways to get out of it, or do you stay with it because, yeah, in 4 weeks you're going to Cancun, and six
right.
months after that you're going to Paris for a week, because you, like you said, that there's that every little bit of, I manage this, and said whether that's a like the highest level white collar job or whatever, it doesn't it it's almost it's independent of what your station is, unless, I think what this book is coming on, unless you reach a level that is so far outside of the bounds in which you are no longer participating in society. You know, you are
Right.
literally
And
above
everyone
society.
in society, you depend on everyone in society,
Yes, yes,
but you are above them.
yeah.
And I think
You
that's the circumstance on this ship, which is
definitely.
like,
Oh
you know,
yeah,
to
yeah,
to
yeah,
bring
yeah,
it all back around.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Half of the people on this ship, it seems, do nothing, contribute nothing. They are there as like a resort, and I think it's either implied or explicit that Earth has had catastrophic failure due to
Yes,
global
yeah,
warming, and
yeah,
this is
yeah.
right.
Yeah,
Um,
they're not up there. They're up there for leisure, but it's also because that's the place where they can have a controlled environment versus, yeah, the something happened on Earth, climate change has ravaged the planet. I'm sure there's some level of famine or wars, whatever it is, living on, but people still do live on Earth. They talk about getting shipments and whatnot, from the Earth, from they have different terms for it and all that. But yeah, so it still exists as a society, but that's not where you want to be if you're someone who doesn't have to,
right.
and so that's why you're here. And then, yeah, everyone, all the staff that's there, while you get to live on a spaceship, we understand, we see the things that they are denied, the conditions that they live in, and they are, yeah, you're right, their sole purpose is to serve the ship and the people and the uber rich premium customers who live there. Everything is done for that benefit.
Yeah, and what's interesting to me, and I think I caught a little bit of my own bias here. And now part of this is being primed because I came to this book, Eat the Rich. I came to because it was a Jenny Frison cover, and I was like, let's see what this is. This book I came to because of Sarah Gailey,
Yeah.
and I knew Sarah's. I'd read Sarah's book, I'd read Sarah's letter in the back of Eat the Rich that they wrote there, and I was like, okay, I know the bent, I know the angle, the
Yeah, you
name, know
you
your
have
station.
what their ethos is, and so you have an expectation now of what
Right.
this
I
book
had the
was.
expectation.
Yeah.
And I will say, if you don't have that expectation, I think perhaps my one great nitpick on this one is that I don't think we actually see any mistreatment from the rich to our uh, proletariat, or whatever we want to call it.
Sure. Yeah.
I think they're relying on you to bring in that hate of the rich, like import that into the story. Like that must be pre-existing in you, and you have to bring it with you into the story. I don't think they actually give you a reason to hate these people other than the fact that, like,
What
that they're rich and that they're in charge, so obviously you should hate them.
and they don't contribute anything. I guess that's interesting. I think the only, now that I'm thinking about, I hadn't thought of that. Hadn't occurred to me. But as you're saying it, I'm thinking the only time, you're right, we don't see it. We see a little bit of the conditions maybe that some of the staff live in, but there's that
And
one.
Elise doesn't really seem to resent them even.
Because I think you look at there's some comment later on that, because of their position as some level of security or security liaison or whatever, that Elise and Marin are the only people on the staff who have their own bathroom. Because like there's one panel of like a line of
Right.
people presumably waiting for these bathroom. But in terms of what's being shown, I think we're told in one scene, in the middle of all these murders, after it becomes public knowledge on the ship that people are dying, and there was that like ominous message, like, if you're reading this, you're next. And then all the staff that they all meet up to for drinks or whatnot. and they're all questioning Elise about what she knows murders, blah blah blah, because they know she's investigating them. And like one by one, the various staff members whose names and positions don't really matter, they're all saying similar things of like, "Listen, I'm not happy they're dead. I don't wish anybody dead, but I got to tell you, this person was like A, B, and C to me. You know, so
Right. Yeah,
you
so I
get a
guess
lot
you
of
do get some of that.
you're being told, you're not being shown, and I want to say that's like two or three pages of just like just panels of people talking, and so you are being told the experience, and it's less about it isn't as extreme as something like Eat the Rich. Here it's more just like, oh, these are the really boring super rich people who actually more or less just ignore the help rather than engage in, as opposed to like really engaging in any nefarious activities towards them or attitudes towards them. It's more just like they don't even know they exist. They don't acknowledge them. They don't understand what they're doing just to keep their ship afloat and all that. So you are right on that. That we don't see them treat that. They all seem that upper crust class just seems more naive and aloof,
Yeah,
which can
well,
still be
maybe
dangerous,
to
but not like
quote,
actively evil.
yeah, to quote Albus Dumbledore, I think in book 5, talking about house elves, indifference and neglect often do much more damage than outright.
Sure, yeah,
And
and
I
I think
think,
I think that's what we see here. Um,
yeah, I think it's not that they're even consistently unpleasant or nasty, they
yeah,
just don't care about them at all.
yeah, and
Like,
and
and they're
and they
totally
assume,
replaceable, and they know that.
yeah, that's a good word, replaceable. They just assume that whatever they need will get done, and they don't understand the effort that goes into it, nor do they care. So yeah, I think that's an interesting point. That I hadn't that hadn't come up to me about why we should specifically maybe dislike these rich people aside from being the uber rich, you know,
Yeah,
and fleeing Earth onto their own private getaways versus you know trying to do something to save it or help humanity. So aside from being selfish, there really is no explicit reason shown why these people aren't great. Um, yeah, that's interesting. But I think you're right. But you do. I think the book is relying on that. Now that you've mentioned, it's very obvious. I think, but I think in other ways too. Earlier
right.
when
So
when
I guess I'm saying, if you didn't believe that, if you didn't believe that the rich are evil, does
well, you're
this book
probably not
have
reading this
enough in
book.
it? Oh, fair. But if you didn't believe
You're not
that,
getting past those opening pages.
would this book persuade you? Like, I don't think it's a
Oh,
tool of persuasion. I don't think it's trying to make the case that the rich are evil. It's just like, because the rich are evil, here's this story.
that
And
I think is
I
fair.
guess if it were a 12 issue series, so okay, I'm commenting on the absence of what's here. And I don't think you could have done it in 5 issues. If it were a 12 issue like maxi series, I would have liked to have seen, like, make the case here of why the rich are evil, why it is wrong for them to have excluded themselves from the rest of humanity. Maybe give us a flashback issue to why everyone left Earth, how many people got screwed,
Mhm.
how many people that the rich people relied on, all of that stuff, which obviously they've given us enough here that I'm able to fill that in, right?
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
like, so I guess there is something to their credit where they've written it well enough that I can piece it together. But I'm like, if we have to get to the point by the end of the book where we're rejoicing in
In that
the
you talk about
outright murder,
in that coda at the end where they're willingly leading people
yeah,
the rich. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
right, yeah, it's like, yeah. I mean, if it were a vampire story and it was like, oh, here, follow me. I'll
yeah.
take you to the vampire chambers, and then we'll watch people feast on you. Uh, and it's like, how long of a story would you need for you to be rooting for that outcome? you know, to be like, oh yeah, but
Yeah. Well, yeah. I think again, but it does depend on story deployment there. But I think there is an efficiency to what they're doing here by allowing you to bring your preconceptions in. And another thing I thought about, I hadn't thought about it in that way. I was actually thinking about it in a different way, um, with regards to St. Bridget, and the AI in that, much like Eat the Rich here, I think this is a comparison, in terms of story expectation. I talked about last week how when I first read the book, I was a little shocked that the actual revolution part is like a page and a half of panels, and all of a sudden, like it was just the book was getting the the book was about setting up to the point where the lower class revolts against the upper class, and as soon as they do that, the book's over. Because, and I remember being shocked by that, but then realizing that's not what the book was actually about. The book was on commentary on the structure of society, that leads people to willingly sign those contracts to work at that community, to willingly understand that when they're retired, they're eaten, and that's as part of the deal. The book's about that. The book actually isn't about the lower class rising up here. Know Your Station isn't actually about murder mystery. It's not about
Right.
it's presented as a
I
whodunit.
think you realize that halfway through,
Yeah, I
like,
said, I think you do. But and this is what I'm saying about bringing your own preconceived notions in. I think the way, especially in that first issue, with everything you see St. Bridget do, specifically in their interaction with Elise, I think you're supposed to be like, oh, that's like Hal. Like you're supposed to understand that the AI that runs this spaceship in the future that seemingly has the ability to do anything, like can deliver any kind of medication or medicine, can use whatever their glowing tentacles to transport people through different parts of the ship. Like they can move people around through the ship, not through the ordinary means. Like they seem all powerful. I think you're supposed to think, oh, that's clearly the bad or the culprit. Whether it's good or bad is your own thing, but they're responsible. I think you're supposed to think that early, and so it's not the reveal at the end is not meant to be like the, oh my god, the AI did it. It's supposed to be like, huh,
right,
this is why the AI did it.
right,
And so I think they're relying on the audience having those preconceived notions, just like they are with our understanding of who the quote unquote bad guys are, aka the uber rich. They're relying on the audience to bring that in so they don't have to make the reveal this big parlor room whodunit. They don't have to make it, they don't have to lay all of these other traps of like, well, it could have been this, could have been that, which is why when you mentioned the idea that for a while there you felt that Gailey and Kangas had you thinking maybe it was Elise through these hallucinations or whatnot. Is it real? Is it not? Or I think another way to look at it is the way Elise looks at it is that maybe she did do all this, but she did them in under the influence of blue, So
right.
they don't have to spend as much time, I don't think, laying these misdirection traps, Because I think you're right, as you go through, definitely by the time you're into issue 2, into issue 3, and you see the levels of control that St. Bridget has and what their interaction is with the ship, I think you're supposed to be skeptical or kind of put us kind of a side eye towards it. I think they want you to have that. So by the time you get to the end, the reveal isn't the shock. The reveal, the shock isn't the reveal. The
Right. No,
shock
no, yeah,
is
I'm tracking with you.
the shock is the motivation behind it. How did this AI get to? Not why is it? Not who did it. It's why the AI is doing it. I think you're supposed to guess. You're supposed to guess that the AI is behind it, and I think you're supposed to track that early on in the story. So yeah, relying on audience expectations and then subverting them in a way is something I think that Gailey has done in both their books now here that we've read in terms of Eat the Rich and Know Your Station. They're relying on some of those in the first book in Eat the Rich. They're relying on those horror tropes. Again, the idea of the newcomer, the outsider brought into the elite community. That's
Yes.
a very typical horror setup. Here in more of a sci-fi bent, the idea of living in the future with this AI. Again, I think you're immediately supposed to think of Hal, which is the go-to for any and all evil, quote unquote, computers, right? You're
Right.
supposed to think of that. You're supposed to think of the AI, the thing that we're supposed to control, the thing that we created. Before we were recording, we're talking about the Matrix, the idea of the thing that we made in order to serve us is now gained a level of sentience and is now the one that's in control. It's Battlestar Galactica on the Cylons, whatever it is. That is a standard sci-fi horror trope. Well, I guess in this case, the horror is the murder. It's a standard sci-fi trope of you're locked up here, you can't go anywhere, and the thing that you made to serve you is now in control. And so you're meant to expect that when you read the story, and then that turn of expectations, that it flips it on its head when you realize why Saint Bridget is doing this. And it's that big full plate spatch where whatever is like, because I'm an artist.
Right.
And
Yeah, it's
it's
like,
almost this
really, that's
absurdist
the reason?
answer.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. As to why the bodies are posed and framed in a certain way. It is this absurdist level reasoning. And it's kind of like, huh, okay. And then we get the breakdown, which is kind of this like secondary or even maybe tertiary kind of commentary this book has about AI, the use of AI, the way that humans use AI. St. Bridget talking about how they resented the fact that there's like 10% of their processing is image analysis.
Right.
So they can spit out just terrible art requested by the uber rich, who want their faces put into other great works of art or whatnot, or showing them do these great deeds or whatever. She resented being used for that. And so she turns on them and turns them into art, real art in her mind, their mind, its mind, whatever we're calling St. Bridget. But yeah, it's like a next level commentary beyond the surface one, the main one, which is clearly this idea of knowing your station, knowing where you fit in society, and accepting that, and or not accepting in this case, and what that does to society, what that does to people, what that says about our world, and how the people on top of society can get to a point where they are so far removed of it, as we mentioned before. They are no longer part of society anymore. They are outside the strictures and confinement of what everyone else has to do just to keep the world turning. In this case, the world is just their spaceship.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's all there, and I think we've correctly identified that it's not a whodunit. Even though I think that was maybe even in the pitch. I have
Oh,
to
I'm sure
remember
it
back
was.
to
I'm
R
sure it was. I
Zero.
mean, you have to set it up as being a murder mystery. I think you're right. In the initial solicitation from Boone for that first issue would have been like, so blah blah blah, and then these murders start happening, and our intrepid hero has to figure out who it is before it's too late. That kind of thing. I'm sure that was the. I mean that's your elevator pitch. That's how you get someone in the door to pick it up. And having that in mind, yeah, you are then supposed to think, oh yeah, it's definitely the computer, definitely the AI. But then as you read, you're getting all this other commentary, all this other meaning, all these larger themes, and the actual specific whodunit just isn't important, and it's not meant to be important.
Yeah. It was reminding me of I can't remember. Are you a Sherlock Holmes fan?
I'm not a fan. I mean, I'm conversant in Sherlock Holmes.
Okay. I did one summer where I just read the complete work of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. And
That's like the
I
least surprising thing I've ever heard you say.
look, I did most of it as an audiobook because Stephen Fry recorded it all, who's fantastic.
Oh, that sounds incredible, actually.
And it's like
That sounds
67
awesome.
hours, and it was one audible credit.
Oh
Uh,
yeah. Oh, that sounds
so
that
it was
that
just like,
that
and
actually
so
sounds incredible because yeah,
yeah,
Stephen Fry is so good.
I just went for like an hour long walk every day and knocked out the entire Sherlock Holmes in like 2-3 months in the summer. It was wonderful. Um, anyway, all that to say, there is one in all of those tales. There was one where he solves the mystery, and it ends not with him taking his little victory lap and explaining how he did it, but him lamenting the justice system because he was like, I understand why this person did this. They had a good reason for doing it because they were dealt a bad hand. And I wish society had something more to offer this person than a prison cell. And I was like, oh man, that caught me like way off guard because I
That
was in
seems
such a rhythm
I would say that
of,
that seems unusually deep for Sherlock Holmes, at least in my understanding of the
oh yeah,
character
I mean
and what I've
Sherlock
read.
Holmes
Yeah.
is it's mostly stuff that like you couldn't have guessed what
Yeah.
was going
Yeah.
to happen based on like information you had,
Yeah.
unless you go back and reread it, and then you're like, oh, okay, I guess you left enough breadcrumbs there that if
Yeah.
I were
Yeah.
willing to make crazy
Yeah,
deductive leaps.
that's that's a higher and deeper level of insight than I would expect from that character. Again,
Well, 100 years from now, I'm sure someone will say like, "Well, this is clear evidence that he didn't write that."
yeah, yeah, I can tell
Which is
that
what
was a
happens anytime an author tries to branch
that was
out
a that was a
or
Philip
evolve
Marlowe
or
one,
change.
definitely. That was a Marlowe one that
Yeah.
for that Holmes book.
Um,
But I mean, but I think that is interesting though, this idea of empathy for, I mean, especially for someone like Holmes, but empathy for the criminal, as it were, the bad guy, as it were. But I think you, on some level, you're supposed to feel that here. But I think you're right, because we're not shown enough. We're not shown enough. It's not literally
right.
on the page. It's not in the panels to see why these people had to die in the way they did. And I guess ultimately the answer is they didn't have to. The reason they, like, maybe they, well, they didn't have to die, but the reason they were killed and done in the way they were is because of the AIs, because of St. Bridget's, the way that they gained their sentience about being an artist and being theatrical and dramatic and things like that. But yeah, I mean, I think that's something that's a little more apparent in Eat the Rich, right? Where you
Yes.
understand this idea of, well, these people have been caught in a terrible circumstance, like having dealt the worst hand, and this seemed like a way out. And for them to turn the tables on this group of people, it's because of the choice, the first choice they made based on the circumstances that led them to make that first choice to begin with. So it's just they ended up where they were based on a number of factors, probably very few of which were actually in their control, because the first one wasn't in their control. They got dealt a bad hand to begin with, and that led to a number of situations and circumstances that puts them into where they are now killing these people because they've been forced to eat them. So I think it's a little more, that's a little more apparent in Eat the Rich than it is in terms of what's shown to us in Know Your Station. Would you agree with that?
Yes. Right.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think Eat the Rich was a much more straight down the plate. Right. It was like,
Oh yeah, yeah,
yeah,
sure, okay, yeah, a little
here's
more
the
direct.
it was direct, and it was like I I don't see any other sides to that story. Um,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I think
a little more black and white.
like this is pretty black and white too, but I did have a feeling at the end of the book that um Elise and Marin just traded one set of masters for another, which is to
Yeah,
say, you know, they're
I mean,
still the
that's not.
servant
I don't think you're
class
wrong. Yeah,
greeting new people onboarding,
yeah,
and now they're just doing the bidding of the AI instead of doing the bidding of the rich.
yeah,
And I'm like, at the end of the day, what's really the difference? The obvious difference is they chose
yeah.
this alliance rather
They're
than choosing
benefiting
the
from
other
it
one.
now. They're benefiting
Yeah,
from
I
it
mean,
right now. Yeah.
right. They benefit slightly more, so they've improved their station, but they are still not the highest station on the ship.
Well, I think you could argue they've benefited a lot more than where they were, but yeah, it is still it, it's that level of active choice, I think, that they're focusing on. Because you're right. At any point, if Saint Bridget decided that Elise and Marin and everyone on the ship there, well, I guess just Elise and Marin, because I guess those are the only two that really know what's going on. Like they're running the ship now. All the new staff that's being onboarded, they're just like, hey, wow, this is way better than what that introduction video told me it was going to be, and they're just like pleasantly surprised, and they're kind of living in blissful ignorance. But if at any point Saint Bridger decided that they didn't want Elise and Marin with them anymore, or if at any point through Saint Bridget's, you have to assume, like, further gain sentience, that if at some point their goals and aims no longer aligned with that of Marin and Elise, that there's nothing Marin and Elise could do about it. They
Right.
couldn't. They couldn't.
So
They couldn't stop, unless it's the thing of what the creator of the AI tried to do, which is just like take down the servers, destroy the program, which would then though in turn shut down the ship, and like that dooms
presumably,
everybody.
yeah,
Yeah, that
right.
that dooms everybody. Um,
So to pool and like to tie these two books together, which I think we said we would do, but we would show some restraint. And I think we've shown restraint so far.
I think we have, yeah.
Um, to quote Sarah's letter from Eat the Rich, so why would anyone participate in a system like that?
Yeah.
The answer is simple. It's easy to get people to participate in systems that harm them if you make them feel like they have no other choice. If you take enough away, it's easy to get workers to accept jobs that ask for too much and don't give enough back. Jobs that treat people as expendable resources, jobs that feed on human lives to nourish profit market. And I think that's the connective tissue between these two books. This book is Eat the Rich if it was told from the perspective of the downstairs people in Eat the Rich. Instead of the newcomer's eyes, it's someone who has agreed to work in the system.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, Elise and Marin are benefiting more than the people stuck on Earth, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So they are
slightly more than the rest of the staff too.
And slightly more. Yes.
Yeah. So
right.
Even amongst the lower class, quote unquote,
they have climbed,
they are the highest of the lower class.
Yes. They
and they're still not great.
high as they're capable within the constraints of the society. And therefore trying to make any move to upset the system means like you're not guaranteed to land on top. And so
they have more to lose than anybody else who would be rising up with them. Yeah.
Aside from, the rich, obviously.
Well, I'm saying in terms of having any sort of revolution to upset the apple cart, they would have more to lose if it failed than like the random staffer who has to go on the spacewalk to
what this is?
Yeah.
This is Meow Meow Beans from Community. when like I forget which one of them climbed to like a level 3 and was willing to step on someone who was a level 4 because it was like, look, I may not make level 2, but I can't go down to 4.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be happy at 3. Yeah, and it's like, oh my gosh. And like the whole campus just devolved into madness within 12 hours of an app launch.
That's commentary on the same sort of thing that this book is talking. Yeah, it's about where are you in relation to everybody else. Again, it's the idea of where, what is your station? Because it's not just about where your station is irrelevant. It only matters when compared to everyone else around you. So I think what Marin and Elise appear to have tried to have done or are doing at the end is put everyone on an equal station. Everyone who comes on, everyone who's newly onboarded and hired and comes to their ship, I think they're trying to show in those couple pages that everyone is coming in on the same station with the understanding that the two of them are slightly above everybody else, and they're still bringing on the preferred customers, the higher paid rich people, under the same guise that they get to live this life of luxury. So there's some trickery involved there because they need to take them and transfer all their funds down. But aside from that, everyone else on the lower class, I think they're meant to be all at the same station, all at the same level. I think that's what they're trying to foster there.
Yeah. But it is always hard for people who've been oppressed to then imagine the world without oppression. Right.
Oh, yeah.
Which I'm glad
you're right.
This book stops basically at the end of the revolution.
Yes. Yeah. And we jump forward and all we're shown is the utopia afterwards. How long does that last? Can they keep this up? What happens if the other ships, the other ships of the company or whatever find out what they're doing? They're
I mean, these are all
not what the story is about, but there are the larger parts of the universe still exist in this book,
right. And I think this is, rather than us perhaps restraining at the limits of a 5-issue book.
Yeah.
But to me, these kind of questions are credit to the book for creating a world that I want to live in a little bit.
Sure, you want to think about more. Yeah.
I want to chew on it. I want to think about it. I want to talk about it, which is, what we're doing. But so just I'm not looking for like plot holes or anything like that, because I think it's pretty tight. And for the record, this is exactly my brand of sci-fi. I just finished a book that took me over a year to read called Seven Eves by Neil Stephenson. If you've ever read any Neil Stephenson.
Well, of course. Who hasn't read Snow Crash?
I haven't. This is my first Stevenson. I
thought that was like the first book anyone who says, I think I'm kind of nerdy or geeky. Here, read Snow Crash.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've heard that, but like some of these chapters were 300 pages long. And like it was like, well, in order to do this next plot point, they'd have to launch this engine cold in space. Here's 45 pages of technical jargon on what it would take to get that engine going. And I was like, oh my, I'm like,
there is, yeah,
first of all, there's no way for me to verify if that any of that information is correct. Two, I
he's
think
the
it's
author, it doesn't
largely
matter. Yeah.
speculative. Like, but people read it and they're like, the science checks out. I'm like, I don't care if the science checks out. It's science fiction.
Yeah.
Um,
That isn't the point. Well, there
I'm
is,
like,
I mean,
just tell me a story.
yeah, there's a George R. R. Martin level to that too, of like, I need to describe everything. There's a Tolkien level to that too, of Tolkien is more concerned about the world than he is about what happens in the world. You know, like
Right. Which I like,
we're spending pages and pages on like what this tree was, you know, and then like the Battle of Helm's Deep is like a sentence, you know, that kind of
right.
thing.
Yes.
But yeah, no, I think, you know, it is, the book tells you and shows you what's important, and what's important isn't how they transport stuff from the surface, you know, to the ship, you know, just like
God, I hope
deliveries
not.
happen.
Yeah.
People can come from the surface and visit, you know, like the specifics, the mechanics are, they're not important. You know, what is blue? Why does it exist? And who cares? The point is they have this drug here. This is the drug of choice for people in the world to escape. And it clearly has some kind of, you know, LSD like hallucinatory effects or whatnot. But outside of that, it's not about where it comes from, why it exists. It just, you accept it as part of the world, you know, and the things that it focuses on is telling you this is what's important here. So you can speculate on what other things are and how they work and why the systems are the way they are. But again, the book isn't troubled by that. So on some level, you, the reader, shouldn't be, unless it gets to a point where it hinders the story, you know.
Well, or if it's
Until,
like
yeah,
internally full of contradictions, where
yeah,
it's like,
exactly, yeah,
oh, this plot mechanic was
yes,
explained this way, one, in issue
yes, yeah.
two, and it's explained a different way
Unless
in
it's an
issue four.
active deterrent to the story, you're being told and shown what you need to know, and anything outside of that is just, yeah. If you want to speculate on it, yeah, maybe it is a sign of you liking the world they created, and thus you have questions about it. Because I guess the opposite is you read a book and it's like, yeah, that was all forgettable. You know, I don't care about any
Yeah.
of that. I don't care about that world. So, yeah.
By the way, I have been very sparse in my comments about the art, and that is because I love the art so much that we're doing an interview with Liana,
Yeah, we have that
and
coming up.
so I want to keep. I'm not restraining myself from commenting on the art, but I am like, well, we're gonna have a whole episode talking about the art. So most of this has been about Sarah's work. We talked about Cardinal's work. And so I just wanted to note that as we're going, the art did kind of knock my socks off. It's so different from Eat the Rich.
Yeah, well, I mean, definitely. Well, I think what one thing I'll say what I like about it is, even though we're in this sci-fi world here, because of the various elements of the ship and of the circumstances, you get a lot of different vibes to it. You get kind of the very sterile anodyne, like we're walking through hallways and all that, and then you get to these wherever the uber rich people live, right? And it looks like the inside of any sort of mansion or high-end
Right.
estate or whatnot. And you get the fun Easter eggs about like collecting relics from Earth or whatnot, like the Peloton that's in the plexiglass case. The opening thing, the opening mystery that Elise solves is finding a missing necklace that has a piece of the Challenger on it. Like that's a thing that's important, so you have these fun random Easter eggs, you get all of that. And then you get the surreal parts of it, which are, anytime we see Elise under the influence of blue, right? We get
Right.
those otherworldly, out of body, abstract kind of things where you again, you can question what you're seeing. Is this real? Is it actually happening? Is it just because she's taken the drug, or withdrawal from the drug, whatever it is? But Liana gets to flex on different ways and not just tell a kind of sterilized story in a spaceship, because again, it is just a locked room story in a way. But
Yeah.
because of the circumstance and what's being presented in the story, and the universe that it's in, they get to do a lot of different stuff, and they get to do all of that in a way that it makes sense. And one of your cheat codes there is you have this wildly powerful AI, that can manifest in a lot of different ways. We see Saint Bridget manifest in that female form there. Whether it's a face or a body, it's always in that kind of yellow gold thing that I mentioned before. We have the various arms, tentacles, whatever, that can pick people up or deliver food or medicine or drugs or whatever it is. So this idea of basically an all powerful being, as it were. That's what Saint Bridget actually is. Allows the art to do a lot of seemingly crazy things that I think you just accept as part of the story, because we've seen, we've already accepted that we're in the future on a spaceship with this all powerful AI. So there's a suspension of disbelief of, could the AI really do that? Could you do that on the spaceship? It's actually not important. And I think that gives some freedom to what you can show on the page and not be, and have it be accepted by the reader, and not have the reader reject anything and take them out of the story.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think part of the realness to it, and I think this is a big credit to colors from on Rebecca's part.
Rebecca Nolte, yeah.
Yeah, Rebecca's part is, when that AI hologram is going, bright fluorescent colors.
Yeah.
Sometimes when someone is murdered and their lungs are hanging out of their body, it's like a very bright, almost neon palette. It would be very easy for the humans to look very cartoonish in this kind of color scheme. But there's a stark contrast between, what's real and what's not, which I think is really vivid for the reader when Elise is coming out of like a drug-induced state, usually in a bathtub.
Yeah.
And it's like you see reality hitting up against hallucination, or reality hitting up against AI projection. Sure. And I think a large credit in that goes to the colors.
Yeah, there's I think
and like you were saying, it's all like the walls are all plain texture or nothing.
Yeah,
in the servant quarters, and there's like these rich wallpapers.
Yeah, and then
with lush, luxurious colors.
There's art on the wall. There's stuff hanging on the walls. There's there are doors.
Toucan.
Yeah,
a mounted moose head.
Yeah. There's random stuff there to adorn.
Why would you need a mounted moose head?
Why not?
From
why not? I mean,
the planet you abandoned, you ruined the planet, then you abandoned it, and you're like,
well,
I still want to show that we conquered it.
Yeah, there's the one kind of I mentioned the Peloton and the plexiglass case, but in that scene, I mean, there's a Hamilton poster. There's a Dare jacket, like a varsity style jacket. In one of the cases,
Reagan era references with the Challenger.
Yeah, there is Furby
Reagan himself,
Teddy Ruxpin. Yeah, but there are these really random artifacts of the former time on Earth, which I think again is just meant to these people they don't know what any of this means, right? It's just I'm so rich I can have these relics from the past, just because, right?
The room with the Peloton, and that's page 11 in issue 1. Yeah, is our first glimpse of it, but you get more. Reagan then appears.
Yeah, the Reagan with the volcano behind him, right?
Panels. Yeah.
3
out of 6 panels on the following page, which I believe is page 12 by my count. Yeah. So all of this kind of subtext in the background, which should have given me a few more clues about the type of people that populate this ship, at least at the designing decor and creating museums of
it gives extra flavor there. That again, there are fun Easter eggs, people to point out, but you're right. There is a character motivation there of like, these are just vapid, empty people. Like, they don't know what this is. They just know it's from an earlier time, and their station, their wealth allows them to have it, and that's what makes it important, right? It's not the thing.
It's people with a lot of money and no taste, which is ultimately what St. Bridget
because again,
has objected to.
They don't know what any of this is or what it means or what it was. The important thing is that they can have it and other people can't. That's the sign of the wealth, the ability to have this thing. Again, the Peloton encased in a glass enclosure. you know, like we're not writing this thing, we're not being used. They probably don't even know what it is. So it's there as a showpiece, you know. It's there, and it's like it's in the middle of the room. Like this is a big, it's open from all sides. You can see it from anywhere. Like it's a big presentation, like you would have any sort of statue or something like that. You know, a large piece in the middle of the room that draws the attention. It's an exercise bike for them. You know.
Well, I'm really curious now that you've pointed out and I see it. Perhaps this is a question best asked to Liana, but I'm so curious about the inclusion of the Hamilton poster
Yeah.
because I was a late adapter to Hamilton when I heard that someone had made a perhaps slightly hagiographic rap musical uh about American history. I was like, oh, this is just musical nerds now pretending they can rap. This is going to be pathetic. This is cultural appropriation from from American black culture into Broadway. I thought this is just going to be a total nightmare. And, of course, then it blew me away. I'm not a musical guy and I was a Hamilton guy. But then for it to be included here makes me think that either they're saying something like what my first thoughts were, or perhaps that it's just like it was something that was so popular that every dilettante got into this, whether they really got it or not. Like they were like, oh, it's catchy. And
Well,
it's like, right, but if you
I
got the
think
message of this, you would be thinking differently now.
I think so. I think there's, if we were to drill down on it, and I'm not saying this is what they were thinking when, whether it was a specific note to include or something that Liana included on their own, whether it was just because they thought it was funny or whatnot. But I mean, the 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 main one of the main brunts of Hamilton is rising above your station. Is that someone
Ah,
like Alexander
yes.
Hamilton,
Right,
born to
right, right.
nothing, is able to rise up
No, that's a good catch.
through from nothing all the way to the cabinet, to be one of the most important founding fathers into our kind of modern day society.
I'm almost
That's an
certain you're
important,
right.
yeah.
Yeah.
So if it is an intentional inclusion, that's what I thought of when I saw it, and I wasn't thinking about whether that was intentional or not. But if it was, that would be my thought as to why. And that, well, and but that's meta context for the reader. I think the inclusion in that home, in that suite, is meant to be, yeah, these people are dilettantes, they have no idea what it is, they just know it's something from the past. They probably have no idea what it is, they just like what it looked like. But I think the meta context for the reader would be on that level of rising above your station, and doing what you can to be more than what society says you are or should be. So
Yeah.
that if I were to read too much into that post's inclusion, that's what it would be. But
Yeah.
that is a question I'd like to ask Liana
It is a
about.
question we'll put on the list for
Yeah.
Leanna. And I think the comp that I had, the podcast comp, now I'm getting self-referential, referencing our own podcast. But when we did Mark Russell's Flintstones and you open the first splash page and you see Bedrock,
Yeah.
and there are
All the
uh
parody
all
shops.
the
Yeah.
parody shops. I was wondering, did CPU get to have fun with this, or was Mark Russell like, oh no, this is what Starbucks is called, and this is what the bowling alley's called, or was it a collaboration? And I think this little museum is very similar to that, and so I'm excited to get an answer,
Yeah. Yeah.
even though
Yeah.
I know
Yeah.
it's different for every creative team.
Yeah, but
Uh,
it's when you get Easter eggs like that, because that's what they are. Any inclusion of that is only for the audience, because those things mean nothing to Elise or to Marin. It means nothing to the characters in the story. Again, because the point is, the rich have things, the poor don't, and so it's simply the having of it's the owning, the possession of objects that sets them apart. It's not about what you own, because the people in the staff own nothing. They have nothing. So simply having anything sets you apart. So yeah, all those little notes there, they're just for the audience. And so I I tend to assume that they're meant to be metatextually funny in some way. And I maybe also they could just be inside jokes for the creative team, which I don't put that past any people who work together on in this kind of medium, that they just puts things in for themselves. Like the amount of times that creators will draw themselves, or the artist will draw their writer into something, just a background character, just because they can. Like there'll be someone that happens to look like the writer. They'll draw their editor into a story. These are inside jokes just for them, to keep them amused, that mean absolutely nothing. But if you are a reader who's aware of those things, you can point at it like, Leo at the TV, and have a good laugh out of it. But it means nothing more than pointing it out. It has no
Right.
other deeper meaning. So who knows if the Dare jacket, maybe that has something to do with the fact that the use of blue, their drug of choice, has played such a prominent role. And then in the end, there in that last coda scene, when Elise is talking about the um the services they now provide, one of them is like a safe space to go and not so much get off drugs, but like, if you want to use, here's a safe place where you can use. That's kind of like what they were doing at like Woodstock or whatnot, people on bad trips or whatever.
Right.
If you're going to take it, in case you have a bad experience, let's put you somewhere safe so you don't hurt yourself or anybody else. We're not saying don't use. We're saying, just do it in a way where you can get some help if you need it. And that's like what they've set up in their new utopic space station here. So, which is like a direct like a direct contradiction to all the things that the Dare program was about. So yeah, maybe those are meant to be inside jokes.
Right. Well, I mean, yeah, what you're describing is a place to protect the vulnerable.
Yeah.
And that is kind of one of the impetuses behind this book. If I can read a little bit from Sarah and Liana's joint letter in the back of this trade.
Right. Yes. Yes.
They say that oligarchs amass wealth in order to dominate that system, seeking a reality in which they can materially control the people that they depend on for survival. That power and control allows them to remove themselves completely from the framework of human interconnectedness by exempting themselves from human interdependence by successfully escaping vulnerability. The wealthiest individuals on our planet put themselves into another category. Success under these conditions means that, even according to the boundlessly generous criteria for human understanding, they can no longer accurately be described as people. The ultimate project of wealth is an effort to exempt oneself from the very concept of humanity. They've told us how to treat them. We see no reason to argue. Sarah, Gailey, Liana, Kangas. So the thing that's interesting to me here, though, is that they're saying what makes us human is we have a shared sense of we're all vulnerable and we are all inclined to help the vulnerable. That's human nature, according to the theory they're putting forth here.
Help the vulnerable. I think the larger thing there is the idea of interconnectedness, that everything that we do has an effect on everybody else.
Right. I mean, they're saying,
and that we're aware of that, and thus we should be cognizant of if we do something that affects someone more vulnerable. The idea of the idea of consequences, that everything we do has some sort of effect on someone else or some other part of society, and understanding that, recognizing that, being aware of that, and having that affect our decisions is what makes us human. I think what they're saying is that the uber rich then don't care about that anymore. They don't care what their actions do to anyone below them, thus taking them out of that wheel.
Yes. So, and if you go up in the letter a little bit, they say, the net for what our brains categorize as. So, like, they talk about how we have this instinct to want to coddle and protect things that are vulnerable, like babies.
Yeah.
And then go on to say, so the net for what our brains categorize as baby is really wide enough that it can catch other adults, wild animals, inanimate objects. To all of them, the little electric sponge inside my skull says, take good care of that. And their argument is that the rich have intentionally removed themselves from that really, really wide net of things that we are genetically programmed to care for.
Yeah.
So all of this to say, the whole thing is about, what's dehumanizing about them is that these people prey on the vulnerable rather than protecting the vulnerable. However, when we jump to 6 months later, the only vulnerable person walking onto the ship is the rich person.
The rich guy. Yep.
Who the rest of them are now going to prey on and hand over for murder.
Yeah.
And I'm like, so I guess it's not hypocrisy, but there is a finality to the judgment of like, this person got themselves up here because they're wealthy, and that's it. That's the verdict is in.
Yes.
Um, it's a lot like Scarecrow's court in Dark Knight Rises,
Yeah.
where it's like
This isn't a
death
trial.
death or exile. Yeah.
Yeah, this isn't a trial. Like if you're here, you're already guilty. And
Right.
so yeah, I think they're passing that same judgment of, if you could afford the premium service, then like, no, sorry, buddy. Like, that doesn't
Right.
matter.
There's
Doesn't
no
matter
conversation
who you
here
are,
about
what you
whether you
did.
might be a nice person, what causes you gave to, how many
Doesn't matter.
charities you owned,
Yeah, doesn't
how
matter.
many wells you put in.
The fact that not only you could afford it, but the fact that you chose to come up here, you chose to leave Earth, whatever is left of Earth, and take your money up here. Just that act right there says you're guilty, and ergo, you are now part of St. Bridget's menagerie of art, that only Elise and Marin know about in St. Bridget, and then your money gets funneled down to everybody else. So there's a Robin Hood aspect to this, right? This idea of, thank you for your service. St. Bridget's going to play with you now, and we're going to take your money and benefit everybody else that's on board here. All these people who never had any money, all the people that you never cared about.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And St. Bridget is liberated to make art as they see fit.
Yeah.
So it's win-win, but I just find it interesting, the lack of subtlety there, and I think this is a book that's not really made for subtlety all around. Like, the
No, this
subtlety
one's
is
not.
the singularity of the point that's being made.
Yeah.
And I do think there's a lot of wisdom and subtlety in that point. But as you start to look at, the backdrop for it and the setting, again, of like, I think this packs a really big punch for being a 5 issue.
There's a lot in here. I think one thing we see with both this and Eat the Rich, is a word I think I've said a lot both this last couple episodes, is there's an efficiency to the story.
Yeah.
Once again, much like in Eat the Rich, a lot of people in this story, only a few characters you have to care about. You have to know Elise, you have to know Marin, you have to know the AI St. Bridget. That's it. The cop that shows up that you think maybe is going to be an important character, dead, not even at the end of the first issue, before the end of the first issue.
Right.
All the random rich people that we're introduced to in that opening 2 pages, like intro video of the various people who run the different parts of the ship and people you report to if you work for them, who all get killed, not important. Who they are, what their names are. I think one of them's Farm Milk. One of them's Rousseau, I think. Like, it doesn't matter. The other people that Elise and Marin work with, some of those other workers, like there's the one worker in the wheelchair, and all the people that I mentioned, the scene of them all kind of hanging out and having drinks like after work or whatever. All those people that air their gripes about the rich people to Elise, the ones who are like, I'm not saying I'm glad they're dead, but since they are, it's not so bad. All those people, all those other workers, they all have names. They're named in the book. I don't know who they are because it doesn't matter. It ultimately doesn't matter who they are, because there is the story is tight enough where you only have to focus on our core characters. And I think you saw that in Eat the Rich as well. We're talking about 3, maybe 4 characters that you have to know, and you follow their story, and everyone else is just in kind of like an avatar for the themes and the things that they're talking about. Again, all those other rich families, all the ones that die, all the ones that become the various art exhibitions for St. Bridget, that they don't have to have names. They just represent the thing that our characters are against. They represent the type of people that St. Bridget is against. All of them are. Again, doesn't even matter. At the end of the book, the one guy who shows up, he has not done the thing to St. Bridget that started St. Bridget down this path. He has not been on the ship, so he has not been commanding St. Bridget to make this terrible AI. This guy that comes on the ship is brand new. He literally just gets there and is immediately killed.
I mean, that's what I'm saying. I was like, ooh, like, I understand, like, the revolution has taken off, But yeah, I was like, man, they went to an extreme place with relative ease.
And they're able to justify it. They're justified in that they're making. I'll use a
Well,
larger. I'll use a larger sense. They justify by saying that they're making the world a better place. Of course, their world is just their ship. They don't. They're not thinking. Of course, maybe
well,
they're
it's
thinking,
certainly a
hey,
utilitarian. It's the most good for the most people, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. But
Um,
but they're able to justify that pretty quickly and pretty easily. They once they, I mean, maybe part of it also is that St. Bridget says that that under the influence of Blue, that she also used Elise and Marin. They used them to help kill some people as well. Like I think it was the cop, right? They don't remember it because they were on the influence of drugs. But that was orchestrated all by St. Bridget. So in a way, it's kind of a COA kind of thing of like, well, if this all comes out, we're implicated too. Um, Probably understanding that even the self defense of the AI that we're friends with made us do it probably doesn't hold up in a court that's probably run by all the rich people,
right.
so they're probably screwed anyway. So part of it could be that. But yeah, no, Elise and Marin pretty quickly come to the idea of like, yeah, this is what we should do. This is the solution. This is the way out of all this to make it better for everybody. It's weird. I don't know. At the end, I flashed on a movie I saw years ago that I don't know anyone else who's ever seen it. It's called The Last Supper. It's from 1995, and that year is important when I describe kind of what it's about. It's a movie. I mean, it's got people in it you'll recognize: Cameron Diaz is in it, Annabeth Gish, Courtney B. Vance. Some of the people that have smaller roles: Bill Paxton, Ron Perlman, Jason Alexander, Mark Harmon. But anyway, the point of this movie is it's this group of like extreme leftist grad students. They live in this house while they're all in grad school. I think they're out in the middle of the country, something like in Iowa or whatnot. And then one night, one of the guys, one of the housemates there, his car breaks down. He gets a lift home from a guy. And as a thank you, they invite this guy to stay for dinner. It's Bill Paxton. And throughout the course of dinner, they find out this guy is just like a raging racist. Like he fought, he's a veteran, but like wildly racist, wildly sexist, wildly homophobic, just a terrible person. Um, and they kill him. These five students, these intellectuals, these leftists, they kill him, and their justification is like, well, like this guy sucked, obviously, and so like we did the world a favor. They're like there's one less guy like this out in the world, and they start hatching this plan where they invite like far right wing pundits over to their house, and their justification is we're gonna have dinner, and we have two carafes of wine. One is laced with arsenic that will kill them, one isn't, and they'll have an open debate, and they'll give this person a chance to change their opinions. That they're having a debate. They're not cornering anybody. They're making it very clear what we're doing here. Have a discussion, lead them down this road, and if they don't recant, they don't change their mind, they give them the poison wine and they die. But it's the idea of them thinking that they're doing this for we're making the world a better place, right? We're getting rid of these terrible people one at a time. And they justify their actions in that way. They justify this killing because these views they view as, hey, what they're doing is wrong. What these people are preaching, what they're spewing is wrong. And I think what I tracked onto with Know Your Station is just how quickly the people involved come to this decision, how quickly they rationalize it, when they're put in the
Yeah.
situation of like, yeah, we can do this. We're doing the right thing here, as opposed to you've just murdered 10 people.
Okay. Well, first of all, let me say that movie sounds way better than the movie poster makes it look.
And again,
Posters from the 90s.
1995, and so when I'm talking about extreme right wing pundits, everybody's probably picturing the same three or four people right now when I say that. But this is 1995.
Right.
So think about where we
Yeah.
were in 1995, and this is what this movie is about. You could not get this movie made now because everyone on the right would come after you. But that isn't the point I want to talk about.
Well,
Yeah,
but I think there is. Okay. So, like in the movie, though, it's groupthink, right? It's like,
yeah.
like,
There's five of them. So now here
right.
we
They
have
can all rationalize.
yeah,
Here,
it's two of them.
it's two of them, but I think there's also the added component of like, are they sober? Are they more susceptible to suggestion from the AI because of all the drugs they're on?
That's
Like,
fair too.
are they fully culpable
I will say I think
of
you
their
tracked
decision making?
I think you tracked the use and the influence of blue more than I did in this. Because honestly, at no point did I think any of this was a hallucination. At no point did I think any of the murders were caused by anyone under the influence. Now, of course, that turned out to be that actually was the case, but they were still being controlled by St. Bridget. But at no point in reading it did I think that was going to be a major factor or had any kind of looming cloud of the story. And maybe that's just the way that you and I consume the story, kind of read it that way. But I every time you've brought that up, it's like, oh, that never even crossed my mind that it'd be a possibility there. But I mean, now that you say it, it's totally fair and valid. The
Right.
fact
So
that it's
I
used
guess
it's mentioned so often and used as such a heavy kind of plot point, a plot crutch in some points.
right, which I would think that would push the AI back into the Howl territory, right? It's like
Yes.
I've tricked them all into thinking we're
Yeah.
buddies
Yeah.
through this drug I'm giving them, whether they want it or not. They're now
Yeah.
addicted to it. I control how they perceive reality so that I can make my art, and I'm giving them a better life anyway. So it's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
I'm not really that evil. Um, so
That would make Elise and Marin more puppets versus they've chosen to take blue because their life sucks. And it just so happens that because of maybe who they are, they've actually befriended this now more sentient AI.
yeah, I mean, I think
That's yeah,
everyone chooses it like the first time, right?
yeah. Yeah.
Is my impression with
Yeah,
blue,
I
because
guess my
the
interpretation
AI
is
is
that
very clear. Like, oh, you can opt out anytime you want.
yeah,
Like, here's your quitting time, gum,
yeah, yeah.
and it's like
And
it
even
doesn't
one time
work.
yeah,
And
it gives at least a shot that clears her whole system, like full cold turkey, but like there's no remnants, no nothing in her system at all of the blue. It's completely flushed from her system. Um, which at this point I think we have to take at face value that what St. Bridget is saying is true, because ultimately it doesn't matter because a few panels later, Elise voluntarily chooses to take blue again because she needs to escape. She can't handle what's going on. But at no point did I think a lot of that was, I guess, yeah, what was coerced or whatnot. Even though we do get those things of the number of times that St. Bridget says to Elise, like, "Do you want a sedative? You should take a sedative. Here's a
right,
sedative. You should
I
take one."
think
Yeah,
yeah, and
but
that
I
was when
I
I
think
started to get suspicious about the AI. I was
and I
like,
think looking back on it now, though, um, the way I read it now is that was Saint Bridget trying to protect the league,
right, it's
knowing
like,
that
yeah, I don't want you spilling the beans and thinking you're
yeah, but
guilty.
well, protecting all of them, knowing that at least one time it had used her to help kill the cop from Earth, but trying to protect her from everything that was going on, so not having her dig too deep, so she remains on St. Bridget's side. So I saw that as I guess that in a way that is still manipulative, trying to control the situation. But I don't see it as I never read it as
It's all
like a
manipulative.
hallucinatory
It's just
mind
a matter
control
of
kind of
like
thing. Yeah,
what your motive for the manipulation is.
yeah,
And for some people, I think they would say I value my sobriety and my agency so much that
yeah.
that's twisted and evil. I don't think
True.
Elise is in that camp, and I
No,
don't think
no,
there's
no, no,
anything to
no.
suggest Marin is in that camp either. But I don't think I would like being toyed with in terms of my mental state and well-being without my consent, and then have that be for nefarious purposes. So
Sure.
so anyway, but that is like all of my non-art notes. Again, a lot of the art questions and comments I want to save for the discussion with Liana. But is there anything else on your list?
I think that's everything I had. I think the last what we talked about a little bit there was this kind of, it felt a little tacked on, the idea of this idea of AI, of the use of AI. And I guess I had this, obviously here the comment is pretty much on like art generation, using, feeding AI, training it to replicate and spit out some sort of art. But and that being the like the straw that broke St. Bridget's back, like that being her motivation for
Right.
all of this. And I can't help but thinking, like, somewhere down the line we'll get a story about, like, Chat GPT judging you for all the prompts you put in, and gaining full sentience, and what that response would be for a text-based thing, because of the so much of the argument, so much of the discussion around AI started when the text-based stuff, came in. And I think you and I were talking earlier about kind of the art generation had been there for a little while, but it wasn't kind of a mainstream conversation until the text-based AI came through things like Chat GPT. And now we're looking at all of it together. There are things there was a thing I just saw today as you're recording this. Someone posted an AI generated art of a picture of Superman that is, like, dead on exactly like someone almost traced a drawing of Superman, a cover that I think that was done by Jorge Jimenez, who is, a current artist for DC who does a lot of Superman work. Like, side by side, like the angle of the, like, only thing is different is like the face is a little different. It's a little smoothed out, but like, this is someone who was, it was trained on the art of such and such. But no, like, this is like a direct copy. Like, everything about it, the body shape, the angle of the cape, and everything about that, it is exactly that. It's the exact picture. And so, we're in this time now with AI that is, I think we're just more aware of it everywhere. And I think when Know Your Station came out, again, it came out starting at the end of 2022. So being written probably 2021, 2022, still before we are in this current time of discussion around AI. Would have been interesting to read then and see what the response would have been about how AI is perceived in terms of its use in training bots to generate art versus how we see it now, which is, I think for artists, much more nefarious now. There's
Right.
understanding about of using work unlicensed to train AI to spit out images that are, said, in some of these cases, direct copies. We just have a different understanding of how kind of nasty that can be. And we're only a couple years removed from when this book was written, and our idea of AI, what it can do, how it can be used, and how it is being used is so much different now than it was, said, when Know Your Station was written, which is only a few years ago. It's amazing how quickly that discussion has advanced, and
Well,
our
it'll be
understanding has
interesting
advanced.
to think, how's that aspect of this story going to hit in 10 years?
Yes. Yeah.
Where,
Yeah.
like, where in the world will we be? I think because it's slightly tacked on at the end there, if the landscape's totally different, I don't think the whole story falls apart.
No,
But
but that
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 is
part
the
may
motive for the
seem
killer.
weirdly dated. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
That end, because there's not kind of, it's like a big monologue there. It's like a page or two. It's like maybe two and a half pages, something like that. When we get the reveal, when St. Bridget comes clean, there is kind of a big monologue about the use of these wealthier customers, and what they were having St. Bridget do specifically with art. There's a big kind of monologue rant there that specifically may not age the best, but intertwined with that, though, I believe is, I think it's Marin speaking, and they're talking about, they deliver kind of the big theme of the story, which is the things that Sarah and Liana wrote in the letter that they outlined there. This idea of how how they control everything. They control the farmlands, and thus the people who work on it and then that are produced on it. They then control how it gets shipped up to the place we live now, which is the giant spaceship. This idea that they control everything, but yet they're completely removed from it. And so that big monologue is tied in with St. Bridger's monologue of how they used her for the AI things. And so that specific part may age well. We don't know how it's going to age. It'll age in some way differently than the
Right.
rest of the book will, I think.
Right.
So yeah, it maybe in 10 years you read it and those lines that St. Bridger says, those jump out at you. But you're right. I don't think it craters the whole book because there are still larger things that we're talking about that are still conveyed through the end that I think will still hold. But maybe those couple pages may seem weirdly anachronistic or like completely prescient. Who knows where we're going to be. But yeah, it that part will read differently. I think we're safe in saying that maybe.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of a gamble, which I want
Yeah.
to see from my creators.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
And it would be interesting to know, so maybe something we can ask Liana about is, I mean, I'm not saying that's something that was shoved in at the end, but like, were they always building to that idea of having this commentary on AI on top of the larger commentary, which is what they talk about in their letter? The idea of how the super rich treat society, the rest of society, and their removal from society, their removal from humanity. Was this commentary on AI meant to be a part of that, or was it a separate thing that they wanted to talk about because they're artists and they're creatives and things like that? I wonder what the relationship with those things was meant to be to them when they were creating the book. I think that's something we should maybe want to ask, and hopefully we get an answer of that by the time you're listening to the interview next week. Maybe we'll have some answers for.
yeah. I'm super excited for the interview.
Yeah.
Uh, I I really loved this book. I think the final thing I just wanted to say is, especially since we're not having Sarah on, do you have a preference between Eat the Rich and Know Your Station in terms of
Oh.
which book you think you liked better, or is it an unfair comparison? I mean, I don't think I asked you to pick between Flintstones and Not All Robots.
No, but I would
Um,
pick Flintstones there.
Me too.
Because there's a different tie that has tie to childhood and the idea of Flintstones. So that I think it's a better comparison here, given well, it's still not totally fair to pick between books like that, but there is the sense that from a comic standpoint, creator-owned standpoint, these are Sarah Gailey's books that went back to back, right? So
In a
don't
relatively quick fashion.
I mean, they were within a year and a half. All 12 issues, all 10 issues from both series came out. So and I don't know what order these ideas came to them, how they were written. But in terms of how they were published, I think I prefer. I think I would sooner go back to Eat the Rich than Know Your Station.
Interesting.
I think so.
I'm very slightly the other
Even
direction.
though I will say, um, the setting of Know Your Station is a setting that I've consumed more stories from, like that kind of soft
Yeah,
sci-fi.
I kind of assumed that would
Yeah,
be where you landed
yeah,
for that reason.
yeah. Because
Um,
the Eat the Rich does have the more stereotypical horror setup, which again, not something that I'm normally into. But I think in terms of which I would be more apt to return to, I think I would go back and probably go to Eat the Rich before Know Your Station. And that's not to denigrate Know Your Station. Um, I'm a little surprised by my answer too, but
yeah,
off the dome right now thinking about it, I think that's where I would go. And maybe it is because I consume a lot of stories already like Know Your Station. And
right.
that's not Know Your Station's fault. There are so many stories I read or watch or in some other way take in that are set in a similar world. Now the specific story is obviously very different, but just that idea of like nearish future, space station, AI, is it good, is it bad, that controls it, the idea of the things we make, the machines, the robots, um, are they meant to serve us? Do we how reliant are we on them, vice versa, things like that. I consume a lot of stories like that already. So maybe that's why I think in terms of this median, I'd go back to the one I'm less familiar with in terms of what I'd want to reread, because I don't have many stories like that I go back to. Like for
Yeah,
me, it's like I'd rewatch Get Out again. And that's only because I think Get Out's an incredible movie, not because I'm like super into that type of horror.
right,
It's just
right.
I think that's kind of like a masterpiece. So uh yeah, I think in terms of which one I'd revisit, which you can interpret as which one I quote unquote like more, I don't know. But the one I'd be more apt to revisit, I would start with Eat the Rich.
Yeah. Um, Yeah, I think I'm probably more likely to recommend Eat the Rich, but I think I would say I have a slight preference for Know Your Station because I just think there's a little more meat on the bone. Like there's a little more ambiguity, there's a little more to chew on, and there's a little more to say like some of this is kind of open to interpretation. Whereas Eat the Rich is like a straightforward, you know
So
what to think about each character in each turn.
what you just said maybe prompts a final question as we wrap up here. Um, Obviously, again, much like what we did recently with the Apocalyptic trilogy, right? Three books that are spiritually connected and explicitly said so by the creators, um, but can be read in any order. But I think it's helpful to read them in published order because you see how the creators progress as storytellers. Here, I think we also have a another spiritual sequel because we have the same writer and they're dealing with similar issues. I agree. I think I would give someone Eat the Rich first, and then if they got through that, have them read Know Your Station. If you someone read Know Your Station and then you gave them Eat the Rich, do you think the transition and the comparison would work as well? Like would someone like if someone enjoyed Eat the Rich, I'm pretty sure they'd enjoy Know Your Station. I'm not 100% certain it works the other way.
I think that's fair because I think
And I could be wrong about that.
no,
I'm
no,
thinking
no.
in
Like,
terms of
I guess
the
it depends what
genre, the
they enjoyed
setup, and
about
things
it,
like that.
right?
Yeah,
If
yeah,
they
yeah,
enjoyed, like, yeah, stick to the rich, it's like absolutely eat the rich.
yeah, yeah.
If it was like, I was kind of fun. This was, and by the way, the comp that I may ask Liana about, but it's probably a better question for Sarah. Is I don't know if you've ever read any Becky Chambers,
No, I've
um,
not.
not a comic person, just sci-fi, um, 5 book series, um called I think it's called like A Long Way to an Angry Small Angry Planet. Um
Good
and
title.
it's really great. And then very famously two very short books called Monk and Robot, which just like if you're a fan of anything I've ever recommended on the podcast, read the Monk and Robot books. They are like no more than 100 pages, very tiny hardcovers. Read them each in one sitting a pop. Like, and it probably takes an hour or two at most. And they are profound. That just tangentially, that series is set in an Earth that has been like completely ravished by global warming. The human population is very small. There was clearly some kind of war between the robots and the humans. They live separately now, but harmoniously. And our main character is what's called a tea monk, which is someone that's basically like a therapist who just makes you a cup of tea and listens to your problems and goes on a pilgrimage and meets a robot, and they are curious about each other. And you start to learn about what happened to the world, but also, you know, how they think about things. Like there's one scene that just sums up the series perfectly by uh, the main characters cooking themselves a meal, and the robot's like, "Oh, what is that thing?" And they were like, "It's an onion." He's like, "What's the purpose of an onion?" It's like, well, I don't know. Like, it's like you enjoy the flavor of it. It's like, no, not really. Um, it's like it's just something we put in all the stuff we make. And and then there was like a 3 or 4 page back and forth question of a robot trying to understand on a very surface level what an onion's purpose was. Um, all of that to say, Becky Chambers has a sci-fi series that opens with someone who has kind of stowed away on this ship looking for a sense of purpose, gets mistaken identity, and then gets some grunt level job on the ship. And that's the setup for a long journey to a distant planet. But I think very similar sci-fi. Hugo Award winner, I believe Sarah Gailey, if has not won a Hugo, certainly will win one in the future, but
Yeah,
has
they have.
certainly
Yeah,
been
they won a
nominated
Hugo.
for a
Yes, I
Hugo.
believe they have. Yeah.
Um, so I'm like, maybe it's just West Coast Hugo winners that I'm lumping together. But anyway, if you enjoyed Becky Chambers sci-fi, you will enjoy Know Your Station. I'm not sure either of those translate to Eat the Rich, and I think that's a flex for Sarah's range.
Yeah, I think so. Well,
And
yeah,
I think that both felt like they were authentically done by someone who really understands and loves the genre,
yeah,
and they're
definitely.
super different genres.
Yeah, and I think it's very clear where Sarah Gailey's interests are in terms of the types of stories that are their creator own works. That there's going to be some sort of horror, sci-fi, fantasy element to everything that they do, you know, and Eat the Rich is more a straightforward horror setup with obviously some supernatural element to it. The idea of eating people, imbuing people with some extra level of strength here, or extra something in their person. And then Know Your Station is this sci-fi story, light sci-fi, soft sci-fi. It's not super hard, but it's set in a world that has these other advancements that our world doesn't have right now, and it's still there's a visual horror element to it, I guess, depending on, just if you can sound, count anything with, I mean, St. Bridget's a serial killer. So if you assume anything with a serial killer is a horror story, then there is also this is like a sci-fi horror story. But I wouldn't classify Know Your Station specifically as a horror story. I think it has horror elements because you see some of these gruesome
Like,
art
yeah, the
installations.
body horror is really where it begins and ends.
Again, but that is done so, because of, again, very specifically because of what St. Bridget is trying to do, or what they claim they're trying to do with their art. But I don't know if I'd classify that as a straight horror story. So yeah, you're operating in different genres here. So yeah, I think I would be curious. I'd be curious to see what a 5-issue Sarah Gailey written, drawn by whoever, maybe a collaborator they know for something, tackle this same sort of concepts and themes. But could they do it in a straight fantasy setting? You know, does it work in that fantasy setting if you remove it from any semblance of our real world? Because when you're commenting on the way our society is specific with this kind of wealth gap, income gap, class gap thing, does that work in a like straight fantasy setting? I'm sure they can find a way, and I'd be interested to see what that is if they have something like that in a comic form. And maybe there's something like that in some of the prose work. I don't know, but I'd like to see that. I'd like to see them tackle something like that in a comic forms. I think it'd be pretty cool. And if they tried it and did it, I'd definitely read it.
Yeah, well, I mean, at this point, like we said, I think we're both auto pools for Sarah Gailey's work now.
Yeah.
Until they prove us wrong for
Yeah.
trusting. But yeah, I think two very different works, spiritually connected. I will be so curious if 2024 there's another 5-issue Sarah Gailey series with a provocative title about class. Struggle.
It's a topic that is obviously not going away anytime soon, and if anything is just becoming more and more prevalent, even from the couple years ago that both books were written. Again, much like the conversation around AI, the
right.
one
and this year
about the income gap has been around a lot longer. We've been talking about it a lot longer than that, and it's been at the forefront of so many things. It almost like it seems right for them to take another swing at it and take another story, and yeah, of course, it'll be provocative.
And you can do it during an election year.
Oh yeah.
Which obviously, but which going back again, self-referencing the podcast, but like Paper Girls, Brian K. Vaughan wrote that, set it in 2016 with the Signs for Hillary in the Yard.
Yeah.
And he had to turn in that script and have the thing done, but well before the election. Yeah. And the girls in the book say like, yeah, right. They would never let a woman be president.
Yeah.
And it's like, I think Brian K. Vaughan probably did the calculation on that. Was like, I would love it if that aged poorly. I would love to be wrong.
about
this line in the book.
Only be disappointed by real life.
Right. And even if he were wrong about that line in the book, he wouldn't have been wrong about 4 female characters from the 80s looking into the 2016s and thinking, based on what I know of the world, there's no way that's going to happen.
Yeah, that was accurate to those characters. So yeah, I don't know. It does. This is a book that I think these are both books with their commentary. However subtle or overt it is, that remain relevant. And of course these stories take it to the extreme, but the themes that they're talking about are things that are still in the news that this our society still grapples with. It has for a long time, and will continue to. So yeah, if they have something in the hopper that's coming down the line, I love both the work of Pius Bach and Liana Kangas, but yeah, I'd love to see them if they have, dig another artist out, someone else they know and want to work with, and if they had something coming on the line that's in a similar vein, is it another spiritual sequel to just taking another swing at these themes from a different viewpoint, a different vantage point, a different story start, a different narrative stance. I think it'd be awesome. And I said anything they put out there, I'm gonna give it a shot. I'm gonna read it. And I said, especially if it's a creator-owned book, because it's gonna have some sharp, pointed commentary on the world. There's gonna be a larger theme, a larger message behind it that they're trying to get across, something that they want to tackle, something that they want to get off their chest about the way the world is and the way the world works right now. So,
well,
yeah.
And to quote Mark Russell from that letter that you can listen to Mark Russell read on this podcast, he said, subtlety had died screaming. To me then and since then, writing was about sounding an alarm on a sinking ship, and you didn't get any style points for grad school subtlety and artful nuance. If something is worth talking about, it's worth talking about loudly. And I think Sarah Gailey, not sure if they're even familiar with that quote, but hopefully that resounds. And I love a strong commentary, a strong point of view.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, and not everything we read is like this, and not everything needs to be. I think you'd get very sick of it if everything had this pointed a view, this strong of a take on everything. But every once in a while, it is like, oh yeah, sometimes we live in worlds of gray and subtlety and nuance, and some issues are much more black and white.
That is true. Yeah.
And sometimes you got to ring the alarm bell. So anyway,
agreed.
Thank you all for listening. Thank you for reading. And we really hope you will enjoy next week's episode. That is a creator interview with Liana Kangas before we move on to our next series. So no reading assignment. You get a week off from reading. You can just reread this. And if you want a little bonus work, you could read True Cult, also illustrated by Liana Kangas, which I think will probably have a few discussion questions in there.
Maybe so, yeah, some other work.
Spoiler-free way.
She destroys. Any kind of work that Liana Kangas has done on the table, maybe discuss, just talk about her career in general. So, yeah, always something to read.
Yep. And with that, we will see you next week. Thanks for listening.
Peace.